how to bring up a lagging muscle group. Now, first of all, what is a lagging muscle group? A lagging muscle group is a muscle group that is lagging behind all of the other ones. So a muscle group that is weaker than the rest of your physique. And you can have more than one lagging muscle group. You can have several. You can have half of your physique lagging. Usually when you're a beginner, you don't really have to think about lagging muscle groups a lot because your entire physique is lagging. But as you get a little bit more advanced and you become an intermediate, you start to see where your weak points are. And first of all, what we need to know is what caused these weak points in the first place. And the answer to that is pretty much always not enough stimulus. I'm sure that there is at least one person who trains their biceps with 200 sets a week and every other muscle group with only 6, and because of that their bicep is not growing, because of course how the fuck are you supposed to recover from that? But I mean, who does that? Probably nobody. There's this whole idea of having bad genetics for a certain muscle group, and I want to tell you that that is bullshit, okay? You can have genetically good muscle groups that are outstanding. For example, for my entire lifting career, I've had my quads being possibly the best muscle group in my entire body. I would actually say my quads and hamstrings together, because they're just good. They're just genetically good. It doesn't really matter what I do to them. They keep on growing. But the same doesn't really apply backwards. You don't just have a muscle group that is weaker than all of the other ones just because of genetics, just because, I don't know, your body doesn't pick up the training that well. It is pretty much always because you lack stimulus. You don't have enough stimulus in that muscle group, and that can be caused by 5 different things. And usually when you have a lagging muscle group, it's not just one of these things, it's usually a combination of 2 or even more of these things. So what are the things that can cause not enough stimulus? The first one is not enough volume. This is not very common. One of the common ways in which this can manifest is you just don't train something. So for example, you have lagging traps because you just don't train them separately. You don't actually isolate your traps. You don't do shrugs. But if you're doing for the muscle group, let's say training twice a week for 3 sets each time, that's 6 sets a week, you're already good. You can grow from that amount of volume if all of the other factors are also in check. So as long as you are training the muscle group, this is rarely the problem, okay? Most people do way too much volume for everything. They think that volume is the solution to everything. And a lot of people actually think that how you bring up a lagging muscle group is just do more volume for it. That is not the actual solution, because you will see that there are 4 other reasons for why you do not have enough stimulus. And none of them, actually one of them has to do something with volume, but all of the other 3 have nothing to do with volume. So even if you ramp up your volume, that volume is going to be shit. And because of that, you're still not going to get enough stimulus. So it's not going to really matter. So you don't need a lot of volume. So what I recommend is first, you try training the lagging muscle groups with 6 to 8 sets a week, okay? And you have to fix all of the other things. And after that, you're definitely going to be growing that lagging muscle group. And if you want a little bit more, if you feel like you can recover from a little bit more, you can add a bit of volume. Now, the second thing is intensity. Intensity is probably the most common cause for lagging muscle groups. Not having enough intensity can manifest in 2 ways. The first one is not training hard enough. The second one is you cannot train hard enough. Let's talk about the first one. You just don't train hard enough. This is usually very prevalent for certain muscle groups. Like, the best example that I can come up with is the calves. The calves are extremely hard to train, okay? The reason why nobody has big calves is, yeah, of course it's partly because nobody actually trains them, but even the people who train them usually don't have big calves. And I think I cracked the code of it like 1 or 2 years ago. And the reason for nobody having big calves is that they don't train them hard enough. Nobody trains their calves hard enough because training calves feels so much harder than training everything else. So something that is, let's say, like 1 rep in the tank left on a bench press, that is what like 6 reps in the tank left feels like on a calf raise. So when you go to failure on calf raises, it feels way harder than going to failure on any other exercise, okay? Going to failure on bench press feels nothing like going to failure on calf raises because it's so much more painful and so much more challenging. And that is why a lot of people have lagging calves. And to that, something I recommend, which I'm going to eventually make a separate video about, is for calves, just force progression, because you're not gonna do it if you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna do as many reps as I can. You're not actually gonna, you're gonna be way too short of failure, trust me. So what you can do is you just always try to add 1 rep, no matter what happens. This is also very common for muscle groups that people just don't tend to like that much. Like, for an example, arms, a lot of people just sandbag them and don't train them as intensely as their main lifts, like the bench press and the squat, just because they're in the powerlifting mindset. But if you want everything to grow equally, you have to train everything equally. You have to treat everything as main work, and you have to do everything with the same intensity. Of course, do not go to failure on deadlifts equally as on calf raises or something like that, but you get the idea. The second reason why you would not have enough intensity is you cannot train hard enough. What can be a reason for that? Well, for an example, doing tricep isolation at the end of your push day, your triceps are already exhausted, they are fatigued, okay? You already did 2 bench variations and 1 overhead press variation, let's say 3 sets of each. You already did 9 sets of exercises that involved your triceps, and even though they didn't directly isolate them, they still exhausted the fuck out of them. And probably you already did other exercises as well that just in general exhausted you. And because of that, now you're at the end of your training session, your triceps are exhausted, your whole body and mind is exhausted, and now you are supposed to train triceps. It's not gonna be as intense as if you had trained them in the very beginning of the session. And that is why it's not going to grow as well as if you would have trained them on a separate day in the beginning of the session. And again, as I said, you can also just be exhausted from all the shit that you did. So, you know, if you do abs at the end of a lower body session, it's at the very end of it, it's not gonna be as good, and your abs are never gonna be nice because you're already exhausted. I mean, you did squats, you did deadlifts, you did calves, you did all of these super taxing exercises, and now you wanna do abs at the very end when you're completely exhausted. It's not going to work, okay? You have to somehow try to make the ab work come a little bit earlier in the workout. Either that, or you just put it onto another workout and early in that. So what I did to counteract that with my arms is I moved the bicep isolation on my upper body days to the very beginning, because it doesn't really overlap with anything. If doing some bicep isolation fucks up your rows for your back, you're probably not doing rows correctly anyways. So you can do biceps as your very first exercise on your upper body day, and it's not going to have any bad effect on all of the other exercises. You can just start off with, let's say, bench press and bicep isolation in a superset, and it's perfect. And with triceps, I completely moved them out of my upper body day because they're already exhausted when I can actually train them, and I cannot move it to the beginning of my upper body day because then my triceps are gonna be exhausted for the bench press and all of the other movements that I needed to. So I do those pushing movements on the upper body day, and then on the next day, on the lower body day, in the very beginning, I do triceps. Because let's be honest, triceps are not gonna be very exhausting. They're not gonna exhaust me before I do my squats, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't take away from my squats. But this way I can do them as the first exercise of my workout, and I get in really high quality work. And I also did a similar thing with abs. I simply just moved them to a place in my workout where it is as early as it possibly can be without disrupting all the other work. So I usually do abs on my lower body days, and right after I do my exercises where I need to brace, where I need my core to be stable, after that I do the abs, okay? So if I have squats that day, let's say barbell high bar squats, and I have Romanian deadlifts, and after that there's nothing that needs my core a lot, I do those movements so that I have maximum bracing, and then I do my abs. The third reason that you can have a lack of stimulus in a certain muscle group is exercise selection. And this is also a very big one, a really, really common one. A lot of people just have ass exercise selection. And I blame the fitness industry for that, because so many people just don't talk about how important exercise selection really is. It is one of the most important things in your training, okay? If you had good intensity and good exercise selection, you're already good, pretty much. On top of that, if you have good technique and you don't skip sessions and you do enough volume, which is pretty easy to do, you're golden, you're good. But there's so many people who just don't know which exercises to choose. They do just some random exercise, or they don't have a big enough variety of exercises. You know, recently I talked with one of my friends and he was telling me that his arms were not big enough. He wanted bigger arms, but he didn't really know how to do it because he was already fairly strong in the arm exercises that he was doing, but his arms weren't that big. And I asked him what exercises he was doing, and as he was telling me what exercises he was doing for his triceps, I was like, wait a second, so you're not doing any extension. You're not working the biggest part of your triceps, the long head. So of course they're not growing as much as they possibly could be because you're not doing everything that you have to in order to grow them as much as possible. Now, I'm not gonna go super into detail on this because I already made a video about exercise selection, how to pick good exercises. But I'm going to say a few points that I personally think are important. First one is length and bias. Not every exercise that you do has to be length and bias, but in general it's a good idea to have a lot of your movements, of your staples, be length and bias movements. Most of your movements should also have a good stretch. Usually if it's length and bias, it probably has a good stretch. Another very important thing is that your exercises are stable. Again, not every one of your exercises has to be stable. Not every one of your exercises has to have all of these points crossed out. But if you can choose a stable length and biased exercise for a certain muscle group that's lagging, that's overall going to be better than a non-stable one that's also short and biased. Another important thing is time-testedness. The more time-tested an exercise is, the more it can go over all of these other rules because it just simply works. If people have been building big biceps with a certain exercise for the past 50 years and it is short and biased, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because it is time tested. We already know it works. And the last thing that I think is very important when it comes to exercise selection is direct strength to muscle gain, correlation on the given exercise. So for example, on a preacher curl, if you get stronger, your biceps are definitely gonna get bigger. There's a huge correlation. On the other hand, if you get stronger in the barbell row, maybe you can get stronger by 200 pounds and your back is not gonna get any bigger because you just changed your technique a lot, because it's not a very standardized movement. The fourth reason for not enough stimulus is technique, and this is also very, very common. A lot of people suffer from this. They do the right exercises, but they don't use the right technique. A very good example of that is the bench press. I've been doing the bench press for the past 6 years of training. And the reason why my pecs are still small is because for the past 5.5 years, I've been doing it with bad technique. My technique was very biased towards powerlifting. I had a big arch, I would use leg drive, but ever since I changed my technique, my chest is finally growing and is coming up because I changed my technique a lot. And I had to shave off a lot of kilos for my lifts. I lift way less on the bench press than I used to because I am doing a way more hypertrophy focused technique. And a lot of people miss this. There's a lot of exercises that you can use for both bodybuilding and for other things. But when you're doing them for bodybuilding, what nobody talks about is you have to use a completely different technique for them to be as optimal. Fuck, I hate that word. As it can be, okay? A bodybuilding bench press is going to look completely different from a powerlifting bench press. Same with squats. A bodybuilding squat looks way different than a powerlifting squat. And you should bias your technique towards hypertrophy rather than towards strength. Because let's say one little bias towards strength, on the bench press, you have an arch, a big arch. That means less range of motion. That means more strength on the bench press. So you're going to be lifting bigger numbers, but you're going to be getting less stimulus. And the stimulus is what you are after. Also, a low bar squat is going to make you lift higher numbers. But unless you want to train your glutes more than your quads, you should not be doing that when it comes to bodybuilding. If you are doing the squat for your quads, you should be doing a high bar squat instead of a low bar squat, even though you are weaker on it. And a very important thing is that real hypertrophy biased technique is humbling. It's not going to let you lift a fuck ton of weight, okay? You're going to lift way lighter weights than if you have strength bias technique, but you're going to be huge. People might be confused, like they see this massive guy and then you're lifting, let's say squatting with a heel elevated high bar squat with let's say 225, but still you are big. That's the point. And keep in mind that your muscles are going to be strong. If you would take a power lifter and make the power lifter do the same technique as you would, they would be very, very humbled. And if you would try doing the strength technique after having done the hypertrophy technique for a really, really long time, you are going to have better numbers on that as well. Of course, it is not going to be a direct correlation because you either train for one thing or the other, and to some degree they're going to feed into each other, but it's not going to be one-to-one. But that is fine because that's not even our goal to begin with. Now let's look at the fifth and final reason why you could be having a lack of stimulus for a certain muscle group, and that is skipping sessions or skipping the given muscle group. A lot of people just skip their calf training. They put it at the very end of their training and they're like, fuck it, I'm just gonna skip it. Or they do the same with abs. They just skip the given exercise, or there is just one training session that you skip very often, and let's say you don't really care about it, so you can skip it, but there is one thing only that you care about, and because of that, that muscle group is gonna end up lagging. So let's say you put, I don't know, triceps on your lower body days, because after listening to what I said, you realize that your triceps are way too tired at the end of your upper body session to train them. So you're gonna do it at the beginning of your lower body sessions. But your quads, your lower body is already big. You don't really care about it as much as your upper body. So whenever you need to sacrifice a session, it's gonna be a lower body session. And because of that, whenever you're gonna sacrifice a lower body session, you're sacrificing tricep stimulus. And because of that, again, you don't get enough stimulus. And even if you sacrifice 2 sessions, just 2 sessions, always the same session every single month, that's already quite a lot of volume that you're missing out on. So you need to show up every single time and do the work. And that's it. If you fix all of these things, I can guarantee you that with time, your lagging muscle group is going to stop become lagging, especially if you focus on it a lot, especially if you're not afraid to sabotage your other muscle groups a little bit in order to bring up that one lagging muscle group to the same level as them. I already did this for my arms. My arms used to be probably the weakest muscle group in my entire body, and in the past 2 years I've been doing nothing but focusing on them like crazy, and now they're one of the better muscle groups in my body, finally. But it took me 2 years of focusing it to get here, and they're still not super big. They could still be way bigger, of course. And that's very important. Even after you fix all of these things, it's going to take time to bring up a lagging muscle group. It's probably going to take longer than 1 year, so you also need to be patient. And while you're patiently waiting, you can also watch this video.